So that's what I did. And then I had to bring it out to the family. And a lot of families, they don't want it known. They want it
Yeah.
to be kept a secret. And this is another thing that so many victims struggle with, because the families will say you're lying. And it's not that they think they're lying. They want to keep the secret.
Yeah.
And that's what I find a lot of.
I bet. Yeah.
So is that something you deal with a lot of victims?
Well, it's really not just, I mean, and mine more so at this point in just, different people that I talk to, that I interact with, like you, and telling their story. And yeah, you see a lot of that. And, I do presentations and things, people will talk about that afterwards. And yeah, it's just a really common, unfortunate reaction, and is that when people receive, family members, whoever it is, receives disclosures, the reaction, instead of, let me take the appropriate action, is, oh man, we got to keep this a secret because you know how this is going to affect us if this gets out. Or,
Oh my
people
gosh,
will
yes.
look at family, or the family taking sides, and you have those divisions. But, and that cuts across, I mean, all kinds of cultures, when you look at wanting to keep that a secret, trying to keep it, this is our deal. And, as you've lived, in this, and yeah, it just adds to the trauma, and these poor survivors, particularly when you talk about that age. I mean, like, how hard is it, to tell somebody what's going on, and then you get victim blame, or, whatever the case is, or they side with, the perpetrator, the offender.
Oh my gosh,
And
yes. You're right. That's exactly what happens. So more often than people even know. And that's why that's why I needed to start this platform, the Voice for the Voiceless, and so that people can come on and not come on camera and distort their voices and let them tell their stories.
yeah,
I think that's important because it gives them just relief for that, maybe that day.
well,
Maybe
it's not
that
just that,
hour.
Ronnie. I mean, that's probably the most important part. But, for other people, I know for me personally, the more of these stories that I hear, the more I learn, the more it affects me, as far as, it helps me be more effective in what I'm doing. It helps me understand more, as I try to understand from survivors' perspectives as much as I can. And, yeah, and I think what you said is so true. And is, it would blow people's minds to understand how often this happens, that families try and keep it in house, try and sweep it under the rug, and we can't do it. We got to talk about it more and more and more. And we need, platforms like what you're doing with your podcast, and with the work that you're doing. We need more of that, because we need society, to take note, because that's how we learn. That's the most effective way to learn, is to hear stories from survivors. Hey, this is what I wish would have been done. This is what should have been done, so that we can implement that, whether it's clinicians, whether it's people in the community, whether it's just whoever it is, so that we can do that and be supportive.
And this is the thing for me. A lot of times with so many, myself, it's generational, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I said, the cycle starts with me.
Yeah.
Once I had my daughter, it was like, let's go, let's go. It stops. It stops. And you don't want to hurt your family members, and you don't want to hurt your parents. What I said was, there is no way that a child displays different behavior and a parent does not know what's going on. I deeply feel that more parents know what's going on with children, and they're afraid. And often, just seeing, just from people I've spoken with, and I've been around for my life and growing up, parents knew, they chose not to tell. A lot of the parents are victims themselves. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
then it becomes generational because now your children are going through this, right?
Yeah.
And I also understood with talking to men that it was okay because it was a babysitter and they were like 10, 11. And so
Mm.
that was a macho thing as some people didn't some people didn't understand that if they were 10 or 9 and the babysitter made them do things, that it wasn't rape, that they weren't being molested. And they just simply didn't understand that that was rape, that was being molested. They thought, well, this is what boys should go through. No, no.
Oh, no.
And so that's another story I get a lot of with the men, a lot, a lot. Sibling sexual abuse. Oh my gosh, that's so real. So you have the older sibling that it happens to, and they then go and molest the younger sibling. That's very common, very common.
Yeah.
And it's all they know.
Mhm.
Mentally, sometimes because the adults in the home are going through their own abuse. And so they don't have time to, or don't want to recognize and say anything. But they see. And that's the sad thing, that there are signs. I mean, if we look at what's happening with football players, like right now, this present day, right?
Right.
Antonio Brown, which just happened
Oh, yeah.
yesterday. I
Yeah.
stopped watching football because of one of the biggest reasons was CTE. And football players had displayed so many signs. And me being from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where it all started with Sarah Weck, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And no idea that I knew he wasn't there anymore. And I didn't pay attention maybe to the newspapers, but to see the movie Concussion, oh my gosh, it says so much. So the same with CTE is the same with sexual abuse victims or victims that are raped or women and men and young girls and boys that are sexually trafficked. This is serious. And it's really going on with the Epstein case.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
going on as high
Yeah.
as our government, as high as
Yeah.
our government. So what laws are going to be passed? What can be done for the victims, who will make them comfortable enough to come out and say what's really happening? The reason why they don't come out because they're shunned. They're shunned
Exactly.
and they're kicked and they're not believed at all. And it starts with the family members who don't believe them, who say, don't talk about it. It's going to make our family look bad. Why would you? I don't care about any of that. No more.
Right.
I did. But it's sad. And the truth of the matter is this is happening to a child probably every couple of minutes of the day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's we don't even have a handle on it. So, the Stanford researcher, Nat Tallman, did a paper not too long ago in their study, and they were looking at 15 previous studies of sibling sexual abuse and the frequency. And it was 60% within the clinical population. So 60% of everybody going to therapy in those studies had been, survivors of sibling sexual abuse. They've been victimized in that way. So we don't know I mean, we don't have any kind of real good knowledge on anything like that.
I
But
will tell you,
I mean, it's
I
crazy.
can, I believe the numbers are massive.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
just like
I'm
this
with you there.
pandemic. It's just like the pandemic. It's massive, massive.
Well, that's in my book, that's why I subtitled it. I go, well, what do I call it? And it's a silent epidemic because that's what it is. And it affects us worldwide. It's not just a white problem, a black problem. I mean, it cuts
No.
across rich and poor, conservative and liberal. It doesn't matter. It cuts across all of it, genders. And this is a worldwide problem that like what you're saying, and what I write about is we got to band together,
Right.
and talk about it. And my experience is I get out and talk to people about it, they don't know anything about it, but after we're done talking, they're like, holy cow, I had no idea. And just the perceptions change. People are much more willing to be involved and open their eyes to things. But we got to educate people. But people don't want to hear it.
But another thing, the reason why a lot of people can't talk about it, and it's totally okay, is because certain things there are triggers. Like I have triggers for me. And I believe every victim has different triggers that they go through. And so that's hard. And sometimes people say, I don't want to deal with that trigger because they're not ready, right? And so that's why you don't hear about a lot of the victims, is because they don't want to talk about it.
And that's the thing. It's because it's silent. And so all these people, or the survivors haven't told anybody, but they get obviously triggered by it. And obviously the reasons why and valid reasons, with what they've experienced, but it's just the discomfort even in talking about it. So I went on a local television show here, and they were great. It was a great experience. But, in the interview, obviously they're uncomfortable talking about my book and the topic. And, in that interview, they're trying to,
I think that it needs to be a bigger platform for this, because it's so many people suffering. And then what about the children that are suffering who don't even know how to tell anyone? See, that's the scary part. And then kids become suicidal because of this. They become suicidal. People say, oh, this happened in their life, or they're just crazy. People don't understand that these kids were suicidal because they were sexually abused, and they spiraled into so many other things in their life. But it started with being sexually abused, and so people don't know how to get a handle on themselves. But if we can somehow create a big enough platform where they could just call and talk and tell their story, I think it would help so many people. I think that in schools, we have this pandemic now, but teachers actually are like parents, right? They're so underpaid, so underpaid. But the teachers are the main ones who see these things early on, along with the parents, because you have the children and they go to school and they see the behavior. And oftentimes when you see a child behaving horribly, they're either being abused physically, mentally, emotionally, in every way at home. So the teachers see this, but it's only so much the teachers can do for these children.
If we can, one, like with teachers, have them recognize the signs, and two, it's building that kind of relationship with the child where they can feel as safe as they can. I understand, with all the threats and everything at home and when you're young like that, but just to try and facilitate those kinds of relationships, which I think a lot of teachers do. But where a kid could feel safe with that teacher, because yeah, I mean, I think that's really the main area that we could get more disclosures is from teachers, and like teachers being clued in, making sure they recognize the signs, making
Right,
sure,
right.
hey, this is how you can, if you suspect something's going on, these are some actions you can take to be proactive on it. Obviously, you can't force that, making sure we're acting in extremely supportive ways to help that child that's disclosed.
Right. And,
Something so
and
horrific.
another thing I wanted to tell you was a lot of these sick victims are victims, right? They were abused. And
That's right.
what I say to
Right.
people, oftentimes these abusers were abused. And so that's really big. And so when I talk about it, I say, these monsters were abused by someone. 9 out of 10, they were, to me. That's just how I think about it.